Good morning. Welcome to the panel discussion today. I'm Kevin Captain, Interim Director of Community Information for Volusia County Government. So for the past 6 weeks or so, we've been hosting these panel discussions with different topics related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We've covered everything from the medical aspects to economic impact to assistance to mental and physical health. Today, we've got a new approach, and I'm confident it's very important to much of our community. Children, whether it's keeping them healthy, helping them maintain good hygiene habits, or stimulating their minds. The COVID-19 pandemic is affecting children in many different ways. And that's why we've assembled a great panel today to discuss many aspects of COVID-19's impact on children and how we as parents, family members, teachers, and mentors can support children and ensure that they're receiving the care and support that they need during this unprecedented time. So, before we get any further, I'd like to introduce our panel. Joining us today is Dr. Scott Kleos. He is with the Radiology Associates Imaging. He's an interventional radiologist that spends most of his time at Halifax Health and a well-known medical educator. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, so with Dr. Kleos, I think if it's okay, I'll call you Dr. Scott, and we'll know why in just a moment.
That's exactly right. Probably all for the best.
All right, and then moving on, we have Deidre Roman. Deidre is an assistant, or the assistant regional librarian for Volusia County, Daytona Beach's libraries, and the county library system. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And then we have, moving to the other side of the panel, we have Dr. Andrea Kleos. So this is why we have to say Dr. Andrea and Dr. Scott, right? So Dr. Andrea Kleos is the president of the Volusia County Medical Society. Good morning, Dr. Kleos, or
Good
Dr.
morning.
Andrea.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us to come.
You bet. And then we have on the other side of the table, we have DJ Lebo. She's the CEO of the Early Learning Coalition of Flagler and Volusia. Good morning, DJ.
Good morning.
Thanks so much. You've been at some of our press conferences in the past, and we're glad to have you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So if it's okay, we'll just start right into questions, and we'll kind of make this conversational. So Dr. Andrea, we'll start with you. The virus has impacted the way we live our daily lives. We've been asked to social distance, or I think we're now saying physical distance.
Yes, much more accurate.
Yeah,
term.
it is. And refraining from gathering groups and limiting contact with others. And this certainly affects children who are used to attending school, playing at recess, and sharing toys. What important tips regarding cleanliness and lifestyle do you think will remain long-term that parents need to get their kids adjusted to for the long haul?
I think that it's very important that we continue to pursue washing our hands. And I think one thing that comes into my heart where we transmit diseases and we don't think about it is we constantly are leaving backpacks and toys on the ground. And the virus, once it's, we cough it because that's mostly the spread, but there is the fecal content too, is that virus then drops to the ground. And so when we lay our purses down, when we lay backpacks down, our shoes that have been tracking who knows where, are always going to have potential viral particles. And we don't need to be nuts about it, but conscientious about it. And so maybe having some spray bottles with diluted water with a little bit of bleach or some Lysol sprays where we're actually hanging backpacks up, maybe spraying the shoes. I have heard some infrared mats now that they're using where people can step on these mats before entering into the hospitals or the school systems that actually will eliminate the viruses on shoes. And that might be a modality that the school system wants to pick up. I know some of the hospital systems are doing that. In a home, you may not want to do that depending on the cost of these mats. But I mean, it's a simple thing somebody can do just for the spray bottles. And just make sure you're rinsing your vegetables. We definitely want to increase awareness of the foods our children eat. But overall, when they're playing together, that they're washing the things that they're utilizing. And, we want our children to be social creatures. We want to maintain that social environment, but making sure if it is a time of concern that we keep the physical distancing and the masks in place if we need be at that time.
That makes a lot of sense, and you kind of described that the virus it's affected by gravity, so it's going down, it's hitting the floor, and we're talking about kids. I know some of us adults will sometimes say, oh, hey, what about the 5-second rule once it hits the ground? We probably need to get away from that, right?
Absolutely. No more 5-second rules, for sure.
So, and making sure that when the kids come into the house, the shoes really
Stay
should come
outside.
off.
Yes, stay outside, keep the shoes outside.
That's great. All right, well, Deidre, Dr. Cleos just spoke to some of the lifestyle habits, things that have changed, hygiene, things like that. What are some of the changes that are happening with the educational platform, with becoming virtual? And, you know, I understand that the library has got some new resources to help with homeschooling and physical distancing for children.
Okay. Well, if the public will visit the library at volusialibrary.org to explore our resources, we have tutor.com. It's an interactive online platform for live online homework help. It's great. It's a great resource for students to connect with a live tutor free of charge. We also have a vast digital collection of resources for the public for reading or listening to books. We have Overdrive, Libby, Access 360, and Hoopla. These are resources or applications that you can use on your computer, telephone, or tablet. We also have educational databases, World Book Online for research, tutor.com I just mentioned, Scholastic, Miss Humblebee's Academy. Miss Humblebee's Academy is wonderful. It's an interactive kindergarten readiness program for children aged 3 to 6. We also have Mango Languages. It's a language learning resource. It's for learning languages online and also for learning English as a second language. That's also a wonderful source that you can use on your computer, phone, or tablet.
So even with kids that, you know, pretty much they all now have smartphones.
Right.
And they can, you mentioned Hoopla. How does that work? Is that the audiobook platform?
Hoopla, it's an audiobook platform, but it also has a music streaming service, and also videos, books, audiobooks, ebooks are there. It's a wonderful resource, and you can use that on your computer, phone, or tablet as well.
And it's free.
It's free.
So
All of
the-
our resources are free, so it's wonderful.
Free is good. So, well, thanks, Deidre. That's definitely a lot of opportunities there for kids to be able to, kids and adults, to be able to use all those virtual platforms for free.
Yeah.
So they go to volusia.org.
They would go to volusialibrary.org, or they can call the library, and we'll talk them through those resources.
Excellent. Great. All right. So, DJ, we know that many people have been at home for the past few weeks. The country is beginning to open back up slowly but surely, and under Governor DeSantis's plan, it's doing it safe, smart, and step by step. But not all child care programs are back. So where can families find, the child care programs and other resources available to them?
So on our website, we have, and it's ELCFV, so flaglervolusia.org. We have a couple of things. So we have also online resources for families, and we focus on health and safety. So those washing of hands, keeping things off the floor, so those kind of same things that the medical field is looking at. We also have the online resources like the library and those free resources to help families for fun activities. And in children birth to 5, it is not the kind of same resources you might find with children that are over 5 years old. It's more play activities. And so those kind of engagement activities are available, and ideas for families to, what do you do with a 2-year-old? And how do you keep them engaged for more than a minute? And so there's all kinds of ideas that we have, and we put new ideas out all the time, and those are all available on our website. And then to your point of how do you find childcare, we have an interactive map of our 2-county area, and it shows you the childcare providers that are opening every day. And right now, we have childcare providers who are trying to figure out how to open safely. And we use CDC guidelines. And so right now, in every room, they are following the CDC guidelines, which say they can't have more than 10 people in a room. So it's 9 children and 1 adult. And so that's difficult when you find
Sure.
the typical guidelines for a 4-year-old classroom might be 20 children in a classroom. So they're having to follow a lot of guidelines. And then they're also using masks. There are lots and lots of hand washing, which has always been the case in child care programs. Always has been a protocol, but now it's even more so. And so they're following those CDC guidelines, and you can find that interactive map on our website. It changes every day. Programs are opening every single day, and we have some that'll be opening even in June. So there's some future dates. But that information is available on our website, which is elcfv.org.
elcfv.org.
Right.
And I would imagine, as you discussed, that the opening of the child care programs, that it's dynamic. So every day, what you're looking at today, it's going to change tomorrow. But certainly, from a forward perspective, things are opening up slow but sure, and there are more and more services day by day.
That's right. And we also track it across the state. And so there's some work being done at the state level to tell you, because there's an awful lot of mobility going on, right? And so while we only work in the Flagler-Volusia area, we have lots of Deltonians who may cross the bridge and want to know what's available in Seminole. So there's some work going on to try to make that same interactive map idea available at the state level. And so we're working hard on making that happen. It's not available yet. I'm supposed to be on a call at 11 o'clock that might give us some insight on when that map, that interactive map, will be available at the state level. And so as soon as I know about that, I'll let you know about that as well.
Excellent, wonderful. More and more information as it unfolds.
Right.
We're getting it out there. Great. Okay, so Dr. Scott, there's new reports coming out, new medical conditions presenting in children that we're seeing, although we know it's rare, but it's still emerging. And this is certainly unsettling and creating some fear and worry in parents. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening with that? As daycares open, I mean, what do parents need to know?
I'm going to start with a little bit of pathophysiology, which may be a little bit of a heady topic here.
Okay.
We'll
But it'll
go
give
through
us
it.
a good understanding.
Yeah, so, and I'm going to attempt to show you what we know about the virus today. It's, I'm a radiologist, so we like pretty pictures. I don't really have that advantage today, but we'll talk through it. Hopefully, if there's any questions, they can ask them at the end. But this may be a tough 7 minutes. But, so, what we know of the coronavirus to date is that this thing is what we call a positive sense RNA virus. So we all are double-stranded DNA. That's how we reproduce. Our cells all reproduce, and our DNA is contained within the nucleus of all of our cells, right? So the nucleus holds all of our genetic material. Everything outside the nucleus is called the cytoplasm, and that's where all of the little mechanisms that reproduce our proteins and read the DNA, and then translate that into the proteins that build our bodies and make our hormones and everything else. So that's how we reproduce. Viruses walk that thin line between living and non-living. They have genetic material, but they have no ability to reproduce on their own. So they have to commandeer our protein-making mechanisms in the cytoplasm of our cells, okay? So this coronavirus has figured out how to do that very effectively. And like I said, it's an RNA virus, not DNA, all right? So it's a little different. We have RNA in our bodies, and RNA, it's called messenger RNA. What that does is the DNA is transcribed into something called messenger RNA. The messenger RNA then leaves the nucleus, goes out into the cytoplasm. That's what gets translated into proteins, okay? So our DNA never leaves the protection of the nucleus. What this virus does is it mimics our messenger RNA. So once it deposits its viral genetic material into the cytoplasm, it commandeers these little mechanisms called ribosomes that start producing proteins and reproduce the virus itself, okay? That is unregulated. Because there's no separate capsule that holds that genetic material, it sits in the cytoplasm and just randomly reproduces. and it will reproduce its own genetic material. It can reproduce the genetic material of another virus, maybe even a different type of virus. And that's the problem with these RNA viruses, is they're very prone to what we call chimeric transformation. And chimerism is combining different parts of a genetic makeup of two different entities and making a new entity. And we think that's where this type of coronavirus came from. It's also the transcribing RNA into a new strand of RNA is very inaccurate. So it's very prone to mutations. So that's another way that this virus evolves, because it can rapidly mutate. It can go through this chimeric transformation. I personally believe what happens is the patients that are most symptomatic get to this point of a critical viral load, where they get so much genetic material in that cytoplasm, and then it is a reproductive free-for-all, where you just get tremendous amount of virus being developed. They burst out of these cells, and what happens is the body makes a desperate attempt to fight this viral, onslaught. And that's what we're seeing clinically, okay? So a lot of the things we see radiographically, one of the first things that came out was the CT appearance of the lungs. And if you look at it, it doesn't look like a normal pneumonia that we see, where you get what we call consolidation of the parenchyma and fluid in there. You get what's called a ground glass density, which is indicative of inflammation. Okay, so it's the body's response to this viral load, and you get almost what we call a cytokine storm. Okay, so when the immune system tries to fight this virus, it releases all of these reactive oxygen species and all these things to fight the virus, and it does damage to our own cells. Okay, so that's why we see what we see in the lungs. It does the same thing in the GI tract, because one of the things that we know about this virus is it gains entry to our cells through something called an ACE2 receptor. And the ACE2 receptor is found in the lungs, it's found in the GI tract, it's found in our blood vessels, and it's found in our kidneys. So what are we seeing people present with? Lung disease, right? They get really short of breath. GI problems, okay, because that's where the receptors are. They have renal failure because these ACE2 receptors are on the kidneys. And now we're seeing the manifestation, especially in the kids, of what we call Kawasaki's, or an inflammatory response, because that tremendous viral load is probably causing our immune system to be hyperactive, desperately trying to fight the explosion of viral particles, and we're seeing the vasculitis, or the inflammation. So that's kind of an overview of the pathophysiology. So it all makes sense. If you put it all together, none of this is an enigma. The question is, how are we going to treat all of this to mitigate the clinical effects of a fulminant COVID infection? Most patients are going to have the SARS-CoV-2 and probably be completely asymptomatic. Those are the people that have a small enough viral load where the immune system can handle that viral burden and mitigate the impact. Those are going to be carriers. That's why this is never going to go away, okay? We're going to have people that are going to carry this virus around and probably do okay with it, but I still think we need to do what we talked about earlier, where we do our physical distancing, protect each other from the spread of this virus, so that we mitigate the impact on the most susceptible members of society.
So I have to go back to my basic biology class.
I know, I'm
Some of
sorry.
the terms you were using, I'm trying to think of. So if I were to rephrase that into a metaphorical concept.
Sure.
It's like the virus gets in our body, kids, adults, and it takes over our internal manufacturing process of making cells. It hijacks our
Perfect.
manufacturing process.
I like the way you said it better. Yeah, that's exactly right.
But in doing so, then it produces its own products instead of the cellular products that we
Exactly
want.
right.
And then those basically take over and consume our body.
They bud out of the cell. So our cells become viral-making factories. So they bud out. And as they bud out, what's interesting is they can infect other cells in our body, or remember where these ACE2 receptors are. They're in the lungs. So we can cough this out. I mean, it's actually brilliant by design. They're in the kidneys, so we can urinate the virus out. I mean, any way to get back into the environment and infect another host. They're in the GI tract, so you can defecate this virus out. Every way out of your body, this virus has figured out the exact protein it needs to attach to not only infect you, but get out into the environment and infect somebody else. it's in the blood vessels in our body. So if this animal's eaten by another animal, it's in the blood, okay? So every liquid, product that comes out of your body can potentially contain the coronavirus.
So it comes in
SARS-CoV-2.
and it uses our stuff, grows and exponentially multiplies, and then goes out by a port of entry or a port of exit in our
That's
body.
it. That's exactly right.
And so when you were mentioning the response that we have and like what we're seeing in these rare population of children with you said Kawasaki, but it's like that bruising and the thing that we're seeing in some
It's
kids.
a vasculitis, like Kawasaki, so it's a Kawasaki type syndrome, but yes, that's exactly right, a
So
vasculitis.
it's a child's immune or an adult's immune response, and it's over exaggerated.
That's
It's like
exactly
you're trying to fight the virus, but as a result, we're fighting our own.
You're damaging
tissues.
your own tissues because, when you have an overwhelming infection, that's part of sepsis, and your body's making a desperate attempt to protect you from this, this invasion, be it bacterium or viral or whatever, and in the process, you're secreting a lot of chemicals that are actually harmful to the tissues of our own body. So, it's like the pancreas. You need pancreatic enzymes to digest your food. If you get a pancreatitis and you start getting inflammation around the pancreas and it starts leaking these pancreatic enzymes, it digests you. That's the problem with pancreatitis.
Wow.
So, all of these little chemicals that we have in our body, like stomach acid, right? It helps us break down our food products. But if you get an ulcer, and this stuff gets into the deeper tissues of the stomach or actually perforates through the stomach, it can cause a lot of damage, all right? So we've got ways to help us protect ourselves, help us to digest our food, but if they're not contained in the environment that they're supposed to be utilized in, they can be harmful to us ourselves.
So we're fighting, but we're fighting ourselves at the same time. And so it sounds like our biggest focus or our biggest ability is prevention.
And I
yeah.
think that is paramount, is what you don't want to do is get to this critical viral load. Be an adult, being a child, the whole purpose of developing immunity is to have a, small exposure to either the proteins or the actual virus or whatever, and your body develops an immune response that trains it to recognize this pathogen. So the next time you're exposed to it, the immune system is prepared for it, right? And it can knock it down before it gets out of control. You guys are probably all too young in this room but they used to have something called pox parties. Have you ever heard of the pox parties? So before there was actually immunity, or immunotherapy to stuff like chicken pox and, measles, some of the kids in the neighborhood, if they got measles, the moms would bring the other kids over to that kid's house and have a little party, because the assumption was while you were young and your immune system was immature, being exposed to mumps and measles and chicken pox at a younger age, you just get it over with. And now your immune system is trained and you have an immunity for life. So that's the way we used to treat it before we actually had the MMR vaccines. So this is kind of what we're looking at right now. How do you develop herd immunity? Some of us are developing it naturally. We get a little bit of an exposure to a virus, and our immune system will be appropriately trained. They're taking some of that, plasma from patients who've had immunity and using that as a treatment to treat people that have fulminant COVID for the same reason, because they have the immunoglobulins that'll help them fight that. So, being exposed to this virus is probably not a bad thing. What we need to figure out is how to do that to gain this herd immunity, whether it's either natural or through a vaccination or, whatever way we're going to do it. So, because it's not going away.
It's not going away, but it's certainly having us look at ourselves in the mirror and reinvent ourselves and reinvent the way we practice hygiene. And so when we're opening up things like daycares and libraries, and we know that prevention is our biggest, most powerful capability and opportunity, DJ, are there? I would imagine that the child care centers as well as the libraries. Can you speak to some of the sanitation and disinfection efforts that are happening in the public areas? Because, like Dr. Scott said, our children could be those vectors or those things that kids touch their face all the time, right? So that's got to be part of the education that we instill into our kids.
Right, and so that's, so historically in childcare, there's always been a health and safety factor that's always been part of licensing and Department of Children and Families regulations, and that has historically been part of it. So there's always been sanitizing of toys. There's always been sanitizing of the space. That's always been part of childcare. Now we've stepped up that game. And so part of the CDC guidelines and reopening of spaces that have been closed and continuing, some childcare programs have never closed through this whole pandemic. Some programs have been serving children of essential workers throughout this whole pandemic, and they've never closed. And they have followed CDC guidelines throughout it. In the smaller classrooms, they have been sanitizing every single night. They have removed group toys. They have had individualized toys. They have sanitized those every day. So the concept of those types of sanitation issues, children over 2 wearing masks has been consistent. It is a much more difficult situation because, as you know, children learn through mimicking and through social and emotional development. And if they can't see a person's expression because you're both wearing a mask, it is a much more difficult development stage that children are going to go through because they can't see that face of their caregiver. And so trying to help comfort a child through a difficult time and a fearful time, because there's a lot of fear
Sure.
going on. And so trying to help comfort them through that can be very challenging.
I just want to say something about DJ's comment there. It's, I find it disturbing myself not being able to see people's face because you don't know how to respond to them.
Sure.
You don't see the normal cues that we associate with, are you friendly? Or you walk by somebody in the grocery store and, you say, excuse me, and they don't respond. It's like, okay, I hope I didn't offend you.
Right. And you don't even recognize them. How many people do you not even recognize?
had
If
it
they
all the
have
time, DJ.
they have a mask and
Yeah.
sunglasses on, you don't recognize
No.
them.
And they'll come up and say your name and like, man, I didn't recognize you. But
Right.
it's very different. But I don't think there's anything that's going to go away soon. So we're
Right.
going to have to re-recognize people based on their eyes. So,
Right.
The other thing too is just talking about cleanliness and the excretion of the virus in various formats when children going to the bathroom, and making sure they're not touching or exploring that area, and making sure that the cleaning staff is very aware of the transmission of the virus through cleaning the toilets and sinks. And so that becomes another issue at another level in any facility, but especially in a childcare facility.
And in a childcare facility, the cleaning staff ends up being the teachers because children go to the bathroom all day long. And so you can't wait for the cleaning staff to come in at night and sanitize because children go to the bathroom all day. And so after each child goes to the bathroom, you have to sanitize that toilet. So it's a much different concept when you're talking about children in childcare than you and I going to the bathroom throughout the day in a single toilet in our own offices.
Sure.
It's a very different dynamic. And so now you're putting an additional level of responsibility on a teacher who is designed to teach your 2-year-old instructional activities and learning, educational information, and now you're asking them to also be a sanitizer
Right.
because they're changing their diaper or they're teaching them how, they're potty training them, in a classroom. And that's a whole different level of responsibility.
The
for these
education
teachers.
is definitely, we're re-educating ourselves. And speaking of the libraries and education, I know that this is making us think and use more things virtually, but we still have library books. There's still people that like books. And even with the phones, keyboards, I would imagine in the library, the same game happens there with the increased sanitation, disinfection, and the whole new way of doing business in a library.
Correct. We do have cleaning staff in the library, but staff in the library, librarians and paraprofessionals, we clean as well. We've done this all along, but we've now stepped it up a lot more, using disinfecting wipes and different products to keep all the surfaces clean. We're wearing masks in the library. We're wearing gloves during curbside service. We're continuously washing our hands. And it's up to everyone to take responsibility to make sure they're cleaning and staying clean and practicing clean measures.
So for books, I heard that when you do the curbside service or when you
Right.
get a drop off and a book comes in, you sort of quarantine a book now as
We
well
do.
too, right?
We do. When the books or items are returned, we put them in a quarantine room and we keep them there. We have been doing it for 72 hours and we just recently moved to 48 hours. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure we're staying close to following those CDC guidelines.
It seems kind of strange to quarantine a book, but, there's all these questions about how long does the virus live, and I guess it's different on the type of surface, but I would imagine by quarantining a book, does it dry out the virus, or what happens there with how
Well,
long a
it's
virus
both,
will
You know,
live?
it can only live for so many hours because it has to actually replicate in order to reproduce to stay alive or to stay on the surface or on the contact. So if it doesn't have an ability to replicate, it will die out. Again, it's not really a independent living entity. So it's dependent on if it can replicate, and if it can't replicate over a period of time, then it's going to die.
Yeah, the question is, I think the type of environment dictates how long that thing can survive. And on certain substances, it seems to have some durability. And they're kind of working through the details of what materials are most problematic. But it's we're going to have to change the way we live from this point forward, as you mentioned. I can tell you in our own imaging centers, we have taken out some of the chairs in the waiting room. We've socially distanced. We are having patients call beforehand to kind of explain to them, what the process will be. We encourage them to wear masks if they don't have one. We try to give them a mask when they come in.
Good.
And we ask them to wait out in the hallway or maybe in their car until they're ready for their exam, so they can come straight in the door, get their exam, and head back out again. The other thing, like Deirdre was mentioning about the gloves and the masks and all that, it's very important that you don and doff these masks and gloves appropriately. And some of the mistakes I still see people making is they wear these bandanas, and the way they take these bandanas on and off is they grab the front of them, they pull them down, and then they pull them up. All of these stuff, the bad stuff on the outside of that mask or the bandana is going to be facing away from you. The appropriate way to take a mask on and off is to grab the ear loops, pull them off, put it down on the table, and put it back on the same way. Keep your hands off the front of it, because you don't want to be putting that all over there and then touching your face. If it's a disposable mask, throw it away afterwards. If it's a washable mask, wash it regularly. It's not going to do you any good to keep a mask on day after day and never wash the thing. Gloves, I see people in the supermarket walking in with gloves, which is fine, pushing the cart around. As soon as you walk out, you got to throw those gloves away. I see people who I've watched them come in with the gloves and leave with the gloves and get in their own car and put the gloves on their steering wheel. And, the problem, not that I'm really, watching people that closely. I don't think I'm stalking anyone, but I've seen it happen. The problem is your hand sanitizers work very well on your hands. They don't work on your gloves. So, if you're going to use the gloves, you can
doing
use
it
it on
now
your
here,
hand.
Dr. Scott.
But if you're going to use the gloves, they have to be thrown away. We will not let patients wear gloves in our facilities for that very reason, because we don't know where they've been before they came into the facility. So kind of a little rundown of how to handle your PPEs.
Well, and going back to, libraries and daycares, kids, adults too, but particularly children, you said that, they learn by touching and feeling, and they're really going to touch their face.
Yes.
But you'd mentioned also that, in the daycares especially, there's a high encouragement to wear masks.
Yes.
Is that helping the children help be more mindful of not touching their face? And is it something that is a tool maybe educationally that's helping to teach kids to avoid touching their face?
I think it's all about repetition with children, and to your point, I think that over time, and see, I touch my face, I do it 100 times a day as well.
It's a habit.
It is a habit, and so I think children learn through repetition, and they learn habits, and they learn by watching adults. And so as as we as adults learn to change our habits, so will children. And I think it takes time. And these are long-term changes we're going to have to make. And as children learn those habits, I think you'll see the changes. It's interesting to me, I remember my girls in daycare and childcare early on, and them coming home and calling me out on not washing my hands often enough. And I'm like, ooh, all righty then.
It's a little guilt trip and make sure that you do it, right?
Oh, yes, it is. And so that I could definitely see them learning the habits that are good habits to have as we grow into adulthood. And so I think that over time, they will learn these habits. I'm not sure we're seeing that results in 6 weeks, but I think we will over the long term.
Repetition.
Right.
So there's a lot of talk nationally, globally, about a vaccine. Let's get a vaccine. You mentioned MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella. We know that vaccines will help. But you also mentioned, if I caught it, that was so technical before, but you mentioned something about the single strand of the virus, the single strand RNA, and how it is more apt to mutate. And I think what you're saying there is that if it mutates, you could make a vaccine, but if it mutates, that vaccine might not really be effective then later, right?
Absolutely.
So it goes back to, everything goes back to the way we have to change our environment.
Well, if you look at the influenza vaccine that we administer every year, there's different strains of influenza. It's a virus also,
Sure.
right? So I don't know if it's the WHO or the CDC or whoever makes this decision, but they can't take every strain of known influenza virus to make a vaccine. So I think they select, is it 3?
Yeah,
Andrea?
they
3 or 4? I don't remember.
select numerous ones based on, like, for instance, Australia is what we're looking at right now. Is Australia going to have another spike of this, and when are they going to have it? And if they are, they would look at the variations of the coronavirus that have happened and decide on that to be, or in the case of the flu, what's happening there, and then or in China, create the flu vaccine that we then utilize.
Right, so it's based on historic data and the prediction
Geographical
of what
data.
is going to be coming down the pike in the following. Some years they get it spot on, okay? Some years they don't. And in those years they don't, the flu vaccine is probably ineffective. I think this last year, we saw a lot of cases of influenza because the vaccine, the 3 or 4 that were chosen, weren't the most prevalent variants of influenza. I think this is going to be the same thing. Hopefully there's going to be enough cross-reactivity, and it depends on what proteins you select to make the virus. There's basically 4 types of proteins on the coronavirus. You've got, your membrane, you've got an envelope, you've got a spike, and you've got a nucleocapsid. Any one of those are potential viral targets or vaccination targets, and hopefully, there'll be some commonality between different versions of the coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2. But you're exactly right, Kev. This is not going to be something that's going to be, a little blip on our history
Sure.
screen. This is something that's going to come back possibly in different forms. We may be seeing the SARS-CoV-3. We may have COVID 2020, COVID 2025. It's something we're going to have to contend with, but I think we're going through the learning process right now of how to mitigate the impact, and that's what's most important.
And I think that's what we're seeing with the children now. It's interesting, the COVID that's showing up in kids that looks like Kawasaki's disease is actually, they're thinking a mutation. It's right now only presenting on the East Coast. And it's presenting with, it's a vasculitis type presentation. So Kawasaki's disease when it comes to the vasculitides, there's large vessel, small vessel, and medium vessel. And this is a medium vessel vasculitis. So when there's trauma, because that virus is attacking a protein, that ACE2 receptor on the inside of that vessel, it then sets off a whole inflammatory cascade that presents with these children with fever, high blood pressure, high heart rate and low blood pressure, and then they develop redness in the palms of their hands and feet. They'll have some desquamation where their skin will start peeling. They actually will start getting bloodshot eyes and kind of like almost like they're having an allergy reaction in their eyes. And and they can be actually very, very sick. And because of the trauma endovascularly inside the inside of the blood vessel, the inflammatory reaction that's happening, it actually sets up a large inflammatory reaction in the hearts, and that can lead to a serious complication and even death. And so this becomes a very frightening time. And so it's not something that that we should be fearful of, but to be aware of, and early diagnosis becomes effective to respond to a healthcare team to help out with that. But in addition, to protect your children, like what we're talking about, and also to understand that with the mutations of these viruses, that our ability to maintain our health is important, and making sure our children are eating healthy and living healthy lives to prevent themselves from getting that infection.
I also want to say it's important to realize that most patients that present, that acquire the SARS-CoV-2 are going to do okay with this. I mean, these are the
That's
exceptions.
reassuring.
So, I don't want
Absolutely.
people to think that this is, doomsday. I mean, for most of us, it's going to be absolutely fine, but the most severe cases do present, as Andrea said, but that is not the majority of presentations, so.
That's right. Most people, actually, we have very few deaths and very limited poor outcomes. It's when that system, the healthcare system, gets overrun, and
Exactly.
when we flood that system. But when we have case by case and we can manage that, or there's a low incidence of infectivity, meaning the virus load in that person was not a massive load. And by doing all these measures that we're talking about, and maintaining our own health and keeping our sanitation appropriate and doing that physical distancing, that all helps prevent and continue to have great outcomes like our county has had, because I think our county's done a great job in this effort of maintaining and mitigating this virus.
And I just also want to say that, the whole purpose originally of the physical distancing and the stay-at-home mandates was to give us time. It wasn't to cure anything.
Sure.
Okay? It was basically to give us time so that we weren't overwhelming the healthcare system, and maybe develop treatments that would mitigate the impact of the virus itself. And I think we've effectively done that. We don't have all of the treatments right now, but we're close, okay? And I think some of the treatments we've already instituted are effective. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be supportive, and there's going to be multiple medications that we're going to use to basically reduce the impact and make sure that viral load doesn't get to a critical point, and save as many people as we possibly can.
And as the cases in our county, we have a lot of people that are coming up positive. Some of those are true positives, some of them are false positives, meaning the test wasn't accurately detecting true virus. But as we slowly develop exposure, our immune system will develop its own form of vaccination without us having to always necessarily do the vaccine. So as we become exposed to this slowly and not in large volumes, we're actually developing our own immunity.
It comes down to time, it comes down to education and prevention. And, as we approach now, summer is around the corner. And normally we have these activities that we're accustomed to every summer, particularly with kids. When we speak on the library end, there's summer programs that the library typically does. Those are going to look probably much different.
They're a lot different right now. So we're closed to the public, but what we're doing instead is offering virtual programs and reading kits, lit kits, with crafts to go. We have, starting May 18th, we have the grab-and-go meals for students that need it. So that's what our summer's looking like now.
That's really important because as the kids are not in school, they're at home, but food is still an issue, and we're talking about nutrition and staying healthy. Where can people find more information about that?
They can call us at the library, or we're serving starting Monday, the 18th, from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, breakfast and lunch, grab-and-go meals.
Grab and go right from, is that going to be at all the libraries?
It's going to be at, I can't speak for the different locations, but it's at the Daytona Beach Regional Library, at our library from 10 a.m. to 12 noon.
Wonderful, wonderful response.
Really great, yeah.
Excellent. DJ, what's the name of that website again of yours where people can find the interactive map and the ongoing changes with our county's daycare offerings?
So it's elcfv.org. We also have a couple of daily type push-outs. So one is called Vroom, VROOM, and it's an app you can download for children that are birth to 5, and it'll give you fun activities that are things you're already doing. So like if you're already folding laundry, it'll tell you how you can engage your child to help you fold laundry where they don't unfold it as fast as you fold it. But you can help fold the laundry, and it's kind of fun.
That's for adults too, right? My wife's going to enroll me.
For adults.
Yeah. And there's another one called EduCare, and it's a texting service. So it'll tell you, you put in the age of your child, like the birth date, and it'll tell you a couple times. It sends you texting messages. It'll say, like, I put in, my kids are in their early 20s, and so I just took 20 years off of them. And so it tells me my 3-year-old, and it'll say, she might be sucking her thumb right now. And it'll give you little tips about what to do if they're sucking their thumb. And it's just a couple text messages a day that just, or not a day, a week, that just gives you ideas about how to deal with regression or things that might be happening that you're just not sure what to do with, or ideas of how to read a book to them, like have them snuggle up with you and how to read a book. But they're kind of cool. And those are available on that same website.
On the same website.
Yeah.
So Echo, Larry, Charlie, Frank, Victor.org.
Yes.
DJ, we needed you 15 years ago. Where were you?
So did I.
Yeah.
Totally.
My kids are also in their 20s now,
Yeah.
close to it.
You and me both.
That's fantastic.
Well, let's start to wrap up and go around and do some closing comments again. We got the website, so thank you so much, DJ. Dr. Andrea, any other closing comments for the public and for our listeners?
Yes, so as a county medical society, one of the initiatives that we've done as I've been president is really on helping people understand disease reversal. You don't have to have diabetes if you're a type 2 diabetic or hypertension or gout or all those diseases that we thought were there forever. You can reverse them by eating a high vegetable diet. You don't have to be completely vegan. You can have protein, but we want healthy proteins, not ones with hormones added or chemicals added. We're trying to encourage people to have less chemicals in their foods and really try to lean on water and not other alternative forms of drinks, even though they sound wonderful with electrolytes and sugar enhancers. But we really want you to just drink more water and just really get out there and exercise. A lot of what's happening in this disease and why people are at risk is because the virus attacks the inside of the blood vessel, and that sets up trauma in the vessel that sets up clots. And those clots go to the brain and cause heart attacks and to strokes, and then heart attacks in the heart, and the kidney disease and the peripheral vascular disease that we're seeing are the clots in the feet and the legs and even in the lungs. And to reverse this, you can actually reverse it by exercising. When we exercise, we decrease the oxidative stress in our body. So exercise becomes very important, not just for weight loss, but really, really to decrease the stress within our body. So we are encouraging a lot of exercise, healthy nutrition, getting the right amount of sleep, and understanding that this county is doing a great job because they helped us maintain our exercise by promoting outside activity. I was really, really proud of our county. They allowed us to exercise on the beach and encourage us to go out. So many other countries around the world lock their people in their homes. And that was really sad because that's not the way to fight a virus. And hopefully with our healthy living ways of living, we won't need medications, but rather we just keep our county healthy.
That's wonderful. Dr. Scott?
I agree 100% with Andrea. One of the things that they're finding is this virus does not do well in ultraviolet light, so getting outside and walking around a little bit is wonderful. Vitamin D seems to be playing a big role in the prevention of the advanced diseases. When you spend 12, 15 minutes in the sun, you develop more vitamin D, so again, important to get out. As Andrew also mentioned, being healthy seems to mitigate your risk of having a fulminant COVID infection. So getting out there and exercising is paramount. Andrew and I are fairly confident because of our lifestyles that we're not going to be in the at-risk population but remember, we are all in this together, okay? So we have to help protect those that are most vulnerable. When Andrew and I go out into Publix or we go to Walmart, we wear our masks, and it's not basically to protect myself, although that's part of it. We're both in healthcare. I want to protect my fellow citizens. We all have to do our part as we relax some of these restrictions on physical distancing. We still want to help each other out. So when you're out, until we get, better treatments and when we're confident about how this is going to go, help your brother out, help your sister out, put a mask on, and, respect people if they want to stay away from you. If they want to give you a knuckle bump or an elbow bump, don't be offended.
That's definitely the new way is the
That's
elbow,
right, the
and
elbow,
that's
right.
what we have to kind of teach our kids, too.
And then drench yourself in alcohol after. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that.
Deidre, tell us again how people can contact the library and just any other updated messages for the programs coming up and new and exciting things for children.
Okay. Well, we're hoping that people would use the library for educational purposes or just relaxation. So right now, we've been doing curbside service, so the public can put items on hold over the phone and take advantage of it. All they have to do is to call us and we can put it on hold over the phone. We will call you when those items are available for pickup. We also have Facebook Storytime Live, which is a perfect way to stay connected with the library and listen to special stories with your little ones while they're at home, away from school, or at daycare, or is just in need of some mid-morning fun. Then we have the resources that I mentioned for audiobooks and ebooks, Overdrive, Libby Access 360, Hoopla for movies, music streaming, and videos. Just give us a call at the library or follow us on Facebook at Volusia Library.
Excellent, thank you. And DJ, as we close, too, one thing we didn't mention, if you could just touch on families with special needs children.
Yes.
What's out there and where can they find information as well during this pandemic?
So depending on kind of what those needs might be, if you're just a little worried about if your child's having some regression issues, and if they've just, not quite at the level you thought they were before the pandemic started, on our website we have something called a developmental screening, where you can go in and depending on the age of your child, all the way up to 5 years old, you can go in and do this screening, and it takes about 20 minutes, and it just lets you complete this screening. And it's questions like, has gross motor skills, fine motor skills, social emotional type questions, and you answer it, we score it, and we get back with you about what that looks like. And then we can offer you kits that help you, that we'll send to you through the mail or we'll drop off to you or whatever, that help you bring that child up to their kind of developmental standard. If it's something a little bit more than that, we'll connect you with the right group, whether that's Easter Seals, whether that's Child Find, that would then connect you with the school district. And then we also have something called a warm line, and it's a group of our staff that are inclusion specialists, and so they really can help walk you through issues. Let's say your child, who is a 2-year-old, used to show their frustration through biting, and then they kind of got past that, but now they're back to it, and you just don't know what to do about it. Call our office, and so our phone number is 386-323-2400, and someone might have to call you back because we're all working remotely and we don't always have the whole phone thing figured out, but I promise you somebody will call you back. And we will walk you through ideas, solutions, and we will stay with you until that problem, whatever the problem is figured out.
That's wonderful. That's the Early Learning Coalition of Flagler Volusia. What great services. Thank you so much, DJ.
Sure thing.
Well, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us this morning and providing such important and extremely valuable information. Children are truly the future, our future, and it's comforting to know that there are resources available in our community to support them. I want to thank all of you for being with us today. Have a great day, take care, and stay safe.
Stay connected with the latest Volusia County news, events, and updates on our social media channels. Like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Catch up with previous stories on YouTube, or just head over to our website, volusia.org.